Just how bad is the Las Vegas housing market compared to the rest of the country? That's the question we're going to answer in this video. We're going to look at some stats, talk about some figures. We're going to talk about what's coming up next with the Fed likely reducing rates this month. And we're going to also talk about what happens when a presidential election is upcoming to the housing market. If this is your first time joining me, I'm Bryce Edwards. If you're here again, thank you for returning. In this video, we're going to break down the market into three segments. We have the single family housing market, just your normal homes here in Vegas, the high rise market, and then we also have the luxury market. All three of these are performing very differently from each other. So without further ado, let's get into it. So let's quickly talk about what's happening nationally. So the first thing to talk about is mortgage rates. So we're sitting at 6.4%, 5.81 for a VA FHA. So we're starting to ease that lock-in effect. The lock-in effect, as a reminder, let's say you bought your home and it has a 4.5% mortgage and then interest rates are now 6.5. So that spread is the lock-in effect. Nobody wants to give up a 4.5 for a 6.5 or a 7 or an 8. So as that window gets more narrow, we're going to see more people sell their homes, get back into the marketplace. And that's kind of what we're feeling a little bit, but we're going to talk about some other things that are also factoring that. Additionally, across most of the nation, we're seeing home sales trending down. This happens a lot before elections. We're going to see our first Fed rate reduction. I almost wanted to say Fed rate hike because I'm just so used to it. We're going to see probably the first cut this month. Sure, it's going to ease the bonds a little bit. The 10 year is probably going to go down. We're going to get mortgage rates trending down. But it's going to be a long road ahead before we ever get back down to low enough rates to really have a big impact. There's probably going to be a spread for quite some time. So yeah, buyers are really hitting pause on a lot of that. But interestingly enough, so the next story here, investors are still coming back to Vegas. I think when they ran this story, the only market we were behind was somewhere outside of Sacramento. So it's a lot to do with rents are pretty stable here in Las Vegas compared to Austin, Miami, places such as that. So it's a safe bet for a lot of investors. They want to know that there's demand for the rentals and they want to know that rents are stable or going up. And then the last thing is luxury sales are continuing to go up here. Best July ever for luxury sales here. This sale I think was like 16.5 million. There was also another sale on the market for 35 million. You've got to also keep in mind a lot of these sales happen off market. If you go into a place like the Summit here and you're with me, sure, you're going to see, I think there's like 2-3 places on the market right now, but there's probably 10 that are not on the market that we can get you access to. So a lot of that comes into play when it comes to the luxury market. So this is looking mainly at just the data on the market. A lot of people are just thinking this is going to be a safe place to put their money. So let's talk about the single family housing market. There's no doubt about it that sales are down. It's a lot of what I just mentioned. It's the gap between the lock-in effect. It's also because of the election coming up. And it's just everybody's waiting to see what the Fed's going to do. So if you look at this first chart here, just active number of listings, sure, we're up a little bit, but we were in a fairly healthy market in 2019 and they were at 10,000 listings on the market. This is the first time in a while I've seen it consistently sitting above 5,000 for just single family homes here. So we're seeing a little bit of that creeping up. But yeah, it's just still not enough listings on the market. Secondarily, we're just going to look at the number of sales trending down once again. So we had a little bit of the spike when we had the spring selling market. And then once summer hit, we kind of just tailed off again. As we get closer to this election, these numbers will probably just get a little bit worse. That's why I think it's a little bit of a buying opportunity for a lot of buyers out there. Days on market, this really just tells you the health of the market. You've got to be real careful with how you're pricing your home currently is what I would say. So we're sitting around 30 days on market. You can see that during winter, we were kind of spiking a little bit. But yeah, I would say 30 to 40 days is kind of average for most homes. We could be seeing a little bit of an effect of people were seeing how quickly homes were selling in 2021, and they're just not taking the reasonable care to price them appropriately now, is what I would say. Additionally, this is just months of inventory. Kind of goes hand in hand with days on market. Just kind of tells you where we're at. This would technically be considered a seller's market because we're in 3 months of inventory. 4 to 6-ish is kind of what they consider normal. But I mean, really, everything kind of reset during 2021. So everybody's going to feel more pressure to have this number be lower. If something's on the market even 3 months at this point, people are like, oh, what's wrong with that listing? So you don't have a lot of pricing power when it comes to being a seller currently. And then lastly, of course, you've probably seen the headlines. We're hitting the highest sales price average again. So this little trail off right here, that's just because I pulled the data on the second day of the month. So there just wasn't any really sales data yet. So that's why it has such a sharp drop off. But really, I think we were sitting just a hair over 600 when I pulled this data. So I don't really see a catalyst that's going to make this go down. I mean, I remember when I got into business in 2011, some of the first people I ran into, they were like, yeah, we're going to wait for the market to crash before we buy. And, what has it done since then? It's gone straight up. So, I would be cautious about waiting to buy thinking the prices are going to go down. You could wait until mortgage rates go down, but then everybody's going to be waiting to do that. So if you're only watching this little segment of the single family housing market, I would say sellers do not have a lot of pricing power right now unless they have a unique property or something that has a unique value to it, such as a view. Maybe it's in a desirable gated neighborhood. Maybe it's a single story in certain parts in the Vegas area. So something along those lines, you have some pricing power. Other than that, you don't. If you're a buyer, I think you have a unique opportunity. I think what we might be looking at is, even though interest rates are 6.4%, I think if you bought something now and it's a home you love, I think that's the important thing to put, is like, it's got to be something you want. I think you could be setting yourself up to buy it at the market price now, see it appreciate while your interest rate comes down at the same time, you can refinance on the way down. I think it's a unique opportunity for a lot of buyers, but um, each person's situation is going to be different. You've got to definitely talk to somebody like myself, see what might be best for you. So now let's jump into the luxury market. I've been fortunate enough to work more in this market this year. It's been more active than the regular single family housing market. So I put a lot more of my business that way when it came to the properties I sold this year. So as I mentioned in that screenshot at the beginning of the video, the luxury market has essentially been on fire when you compare it to the single family housing market. There's mostly cash deals happening, there's some financing going on, there's a lot of off market properties happening, and there's a lot of people buying kind of trophy properties, if you will. The biggest sale on the market is 35 million this year. I think this year we're also going to maybe see that $75 million property close. I'd have to look again and see what they're scheduled at. But when I was just up in McDonald Highlands the other day, I didn't really see it close to completion. So we'll have to see. So let's look at our first chart here. This is just active number of listings. If you followed my videos before, I'm not ever too worried about this number. And that's really because as home prices appreciate, you're going to get more listings above $1 million. So not really a factor in anything as much as it is in the single family housing market. You've got to be much more plugged in with the luxury market, because if you're not actually in there and you're not watching the inventory day to day, stuff like this can sway your opinion if you don't have the right context to look at it through. Number of sales. So this little blip right here where it goes down, I think that's really just because I pulled the data on the second of the month. So I think there just wasn't enough sold data to actually give us an accurate reading. But as you can see, we've been just trending up ever since January, essentially. Interest rates started changing in October-ish. So this is when they were about 8%, and they've been easing ever since then. So you're seeing a lot more people come into the market when it comes to this luxury segment. Maybe they're seeing less pressure to keep their money because they're seeing more favorable interest rates. That's an interesting concept because, like I said, a lot of them are cash buyers. So it's probably more, they just have more confidence in the market than anything. This is just days to sell on average. I would say this is pretty low when we're looking at anything over $1 million. If we're talking 45 days to sell something over $1 million, I think that feels pretty low to me. I mean, we look at 2021, we're about in the same area. So I think a lot of it's come to, a lot of us have elevated our marketing game a lot. So a lot of that's happening to draw in people from other parts of the country. 2019, it was considered not a very good luxury market back then. And you can see that you have much more pricing power right now. There's just not as much competition in a lot of markets. So depending on where you're at, you might have 5 buyers waiting to buy in that community as soon as they see a property come on the market. But then, you have other markets like the Ridges where there's like 4 properties or 5 properties, maybe even 6, listed in Sterling Ridge and Silver Ridge right now, and they're just not selling. Whereas they were selling pretty quick earlier in the year. So, like I said, it's very micro markets that you've got to be aware of here. Months of inventory. Also, another healthy sign, I would say, for the market is a lot of these are selling pretty quick. I mean, we only have 7 months of inventory for it being a luxury market. I mean, look back here in 2019, we were at like 17. So I think it's a very healthy luxury market right now. Places are still selling. If you have a unique property, it's been very desirable to get something like that. So if you're only watching this last part of the luxury segment, what I would say is that if you're a luxury home seller, if you have something that's unique, if you have a very desirable area, if you think there might be pent up demand where there's buyers waiting, I would say you have a little bit of pricing power right now. You've got to be very careful with your marketing though, because it shocks me when I see, I mean, it shocks me when I see any home on the market without proper marketing. But when I see homes on the market and the first day they hit the market, it's somebody took a picture with their cell phone out front. You've got to be careful with that because everybody's getting these alerts at the same time. And if the first impression of your home is a bad one, you don't get to redo that. So there's a lot of things you've got to be aware of when it comes to marketing your property in today's market. You've got to really sit down and do a game plan with somebody and see what you need to do. But yeah, I mean, if you have a great property and it's marketed well, I think you're going to do fairly well in this current market. Now, if you're a luxury home buyer, this is where it's really going to depend on the micro markets. It's going to be, is there standing inventory? Does the inventory trade hands really quickly? And also, you've got to see the off market inventory because even though I don't typically see great deals off market, you've got to be aware of everything so you can actually make the right decision. And I think when it comes to luxury homes, I think all of those people are savvy enough to know you've got to buy a home that you're actually going to be happy with. Don't just buy the best deal, unless you're planning on doing the renovations yourself, I guess. So that's what I would say there is you've really got to know those micro markets when it comes to the luxury home segments right now. Now let's talk about the high-rise market. So my opinion of this, and I like to always validate my opinion by looking at data. So I've found that it's been pretty flat for a while now. It's been just hard to sell a lot of listings. Sure, there's been some sales, 8 and 9 million in Waldorf this year, but in general, normal units they're kind of hard to sell currently. So I think as a buyer, you probably have your pick as long as you can find the right unit. We're still not seeing a ton of inventory. You can look right here at this first chart I will pull up. Give me 2 seconds. Okay, so at this first chart here, so what we're looking at is active number of listings. So even it's been trending up and we're just not seeing the buyers absorb those as quickly. There was a time where units were selling within a number of days. You would be in bidding wars on certain units. That's not currently happening. So this is the COVID spike back here. But other than that, we're just seeing this slowly creep back up. So it's not a very dynamic market currently. This is just a number of sales, kind of the same thing. We're sitting right back at the 2019 levels, even though there's new projects happening, even though a lot of these sales happen in cash, we're just not seeing a lot of sales happen. We're not seeing a lot of people pick up the short-term rentals. We're not, Signature MGM is still the #1 selling place in Vegas. So we're just not seeing a lot of those properties picked up. We are seeing unique properties like the unit at the Vidara that sold the other day in 2 days. Maybe it was actually overnight because I tried to get one of my buyers into it. It sold overnight with a fountain view. Like unique properties are going quickly, but your normal property on the market, if you're in just one of the normal residential towers, it's a little bit harder to get your property sold right now. And then days to sell on average. This is, I mean, it's a healthy barometer at this 40 days, but we're also, the problem with looking at this data without being involved in the market is this is days to sell. This isn't days on market for everything that hasn't sold as well. You'll have plenty of properties that have been sitting on there for 100 days, 200 days, where they just haven't sold. There's always agents that take them off, put them right back on to trick the system. But there's plenty of properties that are just not selling currently. So this is just days to sell, but this is on a properly priced unit. So I think that's important to know. I think in the actual macro market, I think a buyer has a little bit of the upper hand right now. And this one here, please ignore the top part. I don't know why it puts the same thing for everything. So this is just your months of inventory. Other than the huge, this just skews everything, this spike from the pandemic. But other than that, we're sitting at 7 months of inventory, something like that. It's a fairly healthy number, which also reiterates why I think as a seller, you don't have a lot of pricing power right now. And as a buyer, I think you have a little bit more of an advantage depending on the particular unit. And then the last thing we're looking at, don't worry about this little fall off right here. That's just because I pulled the data the second day of the month, but we're looking at just a sales price average. You can see some spikes here. Those were probably the two $8 and $9 million sales in the Waldorf. But other than that, the stuff sitting between 800 and like 1.5 million, it's been a struggle to sell. So we're seeing still signature MGM sell like crazy. We're going to see a couple of sales at Vidara here soon. And really, like, the properties that are sitting in that little higher price point are a little bit harder to sell currently. So if you're only watching this last little segment of the high rise market, what I would say is that if you're a buyer, you likely have some advantage in the market, but it's really going to depend on the particular unit and the particular tower, depending on how many people are looking in that market. As you probably know, a lot of these sales happen in cash. So the mortgage rates coming down probably won't influence this market a ton, other than people might just have more certainty with the market. Now, if you're a seller in the high rise market, unless you have a unique attribute, even if you have a great strip view, we're not seeing those properties just fly off the market. So you've got to be priced correctly, but you've got to know your client, I guess, too, because like the unit in Vidara that sold overnight, like that stuff will happen. So you have to know what's going on in your market. You've got to talk to an expert and understand where to price it appropriately. So thank you for sticking with me through this video. I hope this gives you a better idea of what's going on in the market. Like I said at the beginning, it gives me clarity of what I'm feeling in the market is actually what the data shows as well. So I think we're going to see probably a little bit of a slow market until the election's over. I think a lot of buyers have just hit pause. I think even though we'll have a rate cut this month, I don't think that'll bring a ton of buyers back into the market. I do think it's a unique advantage right now for a lot of buyers in the market just because I think some sellers need to sell and there's not a lot of buyers actively looking out there. So I think if you could find a home that you love, I think it might be a good idea to buy something like that. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts around the whole thing. If you want to discuss this more, I've got a meeting link below. You can always get in touch with me, get on my calendar. Also, you can check out my website below there, get some more information if you're considering buying or selling. Hopefully, this has been of value to you, and I'll catch you in the next one.